a quick introduction about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm a principal product designer. I currently work for one of the biggest kind of travel companies in the world, but mostly within Europe. I'm originally from the States, but I moved over here to Europe 7 years ago now. But my background is actually in computer science. So I started out as a front-end developer, if you can believe it. I didn't last long because I hated it. But then switched over to kind of interaction design. And I've had experience from agencies to in-house to freelance, but now I've been working for big tech for quite some years now. So yeah, that's me.
Okay. That's a that's a big journey there. Like, starting front end development, giving it a go on the code in front, but then really honing your skills into that interaction. I've done the same. I've done the same in my career path. I started off as a front end developer.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
and then I
Okay.
transitioned. So then I was able to kind of um how should you say, speak the developer language and do that kind of
Yeah.
screw face if I knew that they were chatting some BS. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
like,
You're talking about too many constraints here. See right
yeah,
through
yeah, yeah,
you.
exactly. So, yeah.
Yeah. What was your pivotal moment though? Like why'd you go from coding to
Well, initially I started as a designer, but then I saw that there was such a friction between development and design.
Oh, cool. So you picked it up.
Yeah, so it really was the case that if I was able to speak their language and understand really the technical and feasibility to do your designs,
Totally.
then you're able to really negotiate with them and really understand the level of effort in doing something, because it's not simple for them. Like for us to move buttons and change design is so easy.
Mm-hmm.
But for them, it's a lot of code and practice behind it. So,
Yeah, yeah. So you kind of have a better idea of what like it truly entails to
yeah,
put something live. Yeah.
yeah.
I personally love, yeah, like you said, that kind of conducive like collaboration with developers because the reason I stopped development is because I was in a situation where they were just shipping it over the wall. It was like, hey, develop this thing. And what I was building, I didn't agree with, like necessarily. Like I didn't think it was the best design solutions that we could put forward. So I was like I can do better.
Ah,
And so
nice.
and that's how I ventured into kind of the design phase. But yeah, I love the being able to collaborate. Can we talk about like JavaScript or what if we use some, CSS3 over here and do, kind of working with them to figure out what the solution might be, versus just being stuck, being like, oh, you're telling me I can't do it. Okay.
Yeah,
You know?
but let me ask you a question. Do you feel that knowing that development has helped you in your design career up till now?
I think it's helped and hurt a little bit. I've had to at moments where we really wanted to push the envelope and push the boundaries, I had to get the constraints out of my mind because the opportunity to re-platform or really kind of change our tech infrastructure was on the table to discuss. So I had to get the like feasibility and things like out of my head to push it forward. But I mean, unquestionably, when you're working in more of an iterative or optimization kind of work experience, yeah, that collaboration with the developers and stuff like that, and almost thinking about the constraints through what you're putting forward, especially if you're on like tight timelines, the type of client, like whatever that might be. You can think about that ahead, and then it eliminates so much of the back and forth that you will end up getting to with the developer. So, yeah, definitely pros and cons for sure.
Oh, that's a really good to hear. I mean, there's not a lot of designers who do have that development knowledge. And you brought up a good thing. I've always seen it as a pro, but I've never ever seen it as a con. And you just really like illuminated me to really think, oh yeah, sometimes I did think of those constraints and it did
Mm,
pull me back in some of my design process. So I'm glad you
right.
brought that one up.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
Miranda, I want to talk about your website, the UX Survival Guide, and why you kind of made it and the kind of ethos that you've got behind this website and what you're trying to do for people in the industry.
Yeah, totally. So I would say it's more of the ecosystem of the survival guide if I'm perfectly honest, right? The website itself is a bit more of a hub, but I really started UX Survival Guide because before that I was doing a lot of one-on-one mentorship. I do a lot of mentorship in my own organization, but then also I was doing it through ADP List and I think a lot of us get to a point in your career where you are helping so many people because you're at that point in the career, you have so much knowledge. You're like, well, I need, it's my responsibility to share it out now. but it's just a lot of repetitive question. I think designers struggle with a lot of the same problems. And so I wasn't reaching as many as I even feasibly could just doing one-on-one mentorship. So that's why I started kind of this content creation journey with UX design. And also I'm like so late to the the game on this. Like I can't even believe how many UX kind of content creators there are out there sharing, good information. But that was it for me. And of course you have those questions of like, oh, well, there's already so much out there. There's so much content out there. But I do really feel like my very practical kind of no BS kind of approach to a lot
Hmm.
of things is very different to what people, some of the people out there. And that's why I want to start. I saw that opportunity to kind of still add value in the way that I like to lead and teach and influence. And I have so much knowledge. Like,
Yeah.
I've gained so much because I've had such a breadth of experience. And then really the real goal with it was just to be able to reach more designers, and especially really honing in on where I specialize in my career and how I've specialized and how I've grown my skills, where I don't think it's necessary, and I don't think that aligns necessarily with what already exists out there, so that's where I feel I can add benefit.
You mentioned that there's kind of like repetitive questions that you've noticed since you've been mentoring and even up until this day making UX survival guide. Can you just give me an example of kind of questions that you find
Uh,
that just see you roll your eyes back. I saw your eyes just roll really back.
So
Like,
far back. Yeah, I mean, I get it at the end of like,
yeah.
we all portfolio. How do you build a portfolio? What needs to go in a case study? How many projects go in a case study? What do I need to put on my resume? What type of experience do I need? What do I need to break into the industry? How do I need to move up from a
Hmm.
from a core to a senior? Oh, yeah, but so I love actually since starting this last year that I'm actually getting more nuanced questions than I was typically like doing more typical kind of one-on-one, because it was so like, hey, can you review my portfolio? What is the case study? What's the right level of detail in a case study? And trust me, I went through that whole phase. I wrote an article way back when it was like UX portfolios, everybody's lying to you. Because it was just like this epiphany moment that I had. I'm like, oh, a case study isn't meant to be your, you know, end all be all, every detail you can milk and like, present it forward. It's not that at all. And it's kind of crazy, but at the same time, because it's so critical to a designer's success, I get it. And there's also mixed messages out there. There's a lot of people saying a lot of the same things, but I think what's really different from when I started is just the amount of information that a designer today would have to sift through, with little to no guidance. So yeah, those are those are some of the bar none questions.
I personally think with the portfolios that are being sent out nowadays from professionals are diminishing the UX side of our industry. And what people are seeing are just the end bit. And we're not seeing that core UX. And at the same time, and I'll give some other side to it, I personally think that people who are receiving these applications, and I don't want to gaslight anyone in particular, I just think that people who are receiving it don't want to see that UX or are not interested in the UX. They just want to see the final end result. Now, what's your thoughts about this?
Think I think I mostly disagree. Because if there is too much emphasis on the UI side of thing, I don't hire them. As somebody who is a hiring manager, looks at portfolios a lot. If it's just the end result, forget about it. You're off the stack immediately. But it's because of the types of roles I'm hiring for. I'm not hiring just for a UI designer. I'm hiring for a product designer. And so I will happily see a lower skill within the visual design aspect if you have stronger skills within your UX kind of toolkit and your UX methodologies. Because the way that I look at portfolios is really to understand your thinking and your process. And then that's why I also look at multiple case studies, because I want to see how you pivot, how you employ different methodologies for different projects and tackle different problems and stuff like that. I do think there's still a bit of what you're saying is like the dribble effect, right? is where
Yeah,
it's like you just have that final result. It's beautiful.
yeah,
And a lot of Behance portfolios look like that. But I think, I mean, yeah, in every single advice I ever give is to never, ever, ever do that. Even if it is a purely visual project, literally, if it's a brand refresh or something like that, you've chosen those colors for a reason. You've chosen the typography for a reason, the mood, the white space, the template, the information architecture. You've made all these decisions for some reason, hopefully for a good reason. But it's still so important to kind of illustrate that process. And that's, yeah, to me, where the UX side of things comes in. But I think it boils down to the role that you're really applying for. Because, yeah, I wouldn't even give a UI centric portfolio a second thought.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's brilliant because I think I also see this in, professionals in the field, not just juniors. I'm talking senior to kind of leads where they don't even show kind of like the core principles in their design process, or kind of like, hey, we use this principle, or we chose this font because of this, or we done this
Mm.
decision. And is that something that you tend to, how should you say, help your students? Shall I call them students in some way?
Sure.
Do you, and so do you help your students in really show when they do design work that they do have something that backs up their kind of design claims with using like UX laws and etc. And how do you kind of emphasize them to do that?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one because there are so many, like you said, kind of visual design principles or UX laws and stuff like that. And I think it's all really essential to know. But I've never in my life been like, the reason I chose this is because of Hicks law, which Hicks
Yeah,
law means, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, you just look like a stuffy,
yeah,
but you can still explain it in a way that a product manager can understand, or a researcher or something like that. It's like, this is best practice for these reasons, or I can show you competitive sites who are doing the same thing. Like, yeah, there is, I mean, the strongest thing and the best thing you can do as a designer is understand your rationale and your intention. If you just go forward and be like, I just think this looks great. Whoo, you're not gonna last.
yeah.
Yeah, so that is one of the things that I think I have helped people with most. It's got to be top five at the very least, but it's in the challenging of why. Why have you made these design decisions? And if you're not concrete, because not every pixel has to have intention, right? There are some things that you're just guessing at. But if somebody comes at you and challenges it, that's fine. There's ways to kind of qualitatively or quantitatively validate some of those things that where you're not so confident about. But as UX designers, we're there to make the recommendation. If you can't back your recommendation, I'm scared for you.
Yeah, yeah.
Because if it's not me, it's a product manager, it's a senior director, it's a VP. You know what I mean? I would never let my designers put themselves in a position where I left them out to dry because somebody will challenge like why you did the things that you did.
See, you just mentioned something where I think it's very, very important for people to get that knowledge or get that training. Um, you mentioned the ability to kind of explain what they've done and the ability to kind of not to say, oh yeah, I've done this because of X, Y, Z, but also be able to educate, sell, storytell. And I want to get your opinion. Do you think a lot of people in this industry are not being taught those kind of business skills, but are solely focusing on just the design and the prettiness? Okay, let's not use the word prettiness, just the fun bit, and the fun bit is the design bit.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think a lot of people who are coming in the industry are not seeing the reality that the design is actually 20% and 80% is the ability to communicate?
And I mean, I started getting into design over 10 years ago, almost 13 years ago now. And that's the dream that I was sold, the visual fun side of design. Like, I didn't know communication or presentation skills would be so critical to my career. And if you would have told me that, I probably would have second guessed like what career I was actually getting into. But yeah, I do fear a lot of that. I see some stuff online that's like, it's just kind of this flash or wave of like cool things or cool designs, really, artistically focused, but maybe not so great on the UX side of things. Um, but yeah, and also when Dribble came out, that was the huge wave. It's like, oh, I can just that's it. This is the whole design. It's just this shot, this static image of a, a cool looking website. And there's some talented people out there, but yeah, exactly what you said. I actually have always said 60-40. So yours is more extreme, the
Yeah, yeah,
20-80. But
yeah,
yeah, 40% is designing and then 60% is being able to sell your design. Because at the end of the day, I've stood by this as long as since I've learned it for like 10 years now. You could be the best designer in the world, but if you can't sell it, no one cares.
yes,
No one cares, because
absolutely.
especially because design is so subject to opinion. You can have a client come in, just say you're like you working for your agency and like, I want the logo bigger. I want to move this thing over there, and I want to again, if you can't sell the rationale as to why maybe to not do those things,
Yeah,
um, you're dead in the water. And then what actually gets produced and put in front of your intended users is not even remotely what you actually, kind of mocked up.
yeah, yeah. There's always that misconception that whatever you hand over is going to be 100% designed, or sorry, developed, and it's never the case. It is
No,
never,
and that
never
was
the
a
case.
hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, that's because you put a lot of effort. I think as designers, we put a lot of effort into all the small details, and for developers not to see that, it really just kind of just gives you a kick down.
Yeah, it definitely does. And that's a hot tip. Never link to the live site in your case studies
Yeah,
because it
yeah,
changes and it doesn't look like you want it to, trust me.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The reason why I use that number 80-20,
Mm,
and I used to use 60-40 before.
okay.
I think nowadays we're moving so quick, budgets are becoming tighter. We're literally, PIs are being cut shorter in some. It used to be quarters. I don't know if people still do PIs or big room meetings or whatever you can say over a roadmap year. But I'm noticing that it is the case that it's just gone down to that kind of 20%. And we are trying to, how should I say, demonstrate more value in what we do. How do you tell your students to advocate in showing more value in their work or in the profession?
Oh, I mean, I think the biggest thing, I mean, you kind of already are hitting on it, which is you have to understand what the business is even trying to achieve in order to contribute to the value of the experience, right? So you kind of need to know what the goals are. I think this was a learning curve for me, even. It's, we're so user-centric, users, empathy, all these things. But at the end of the day, the reason you're hired is to add value to the business. So then you are the kind of person in between the user needs and advocating for that, but also figuring out a way to address those user needs as a way to serve the business. So when we talk about UX metrics and some of these other things, it's a signal to what the business is overall trying to achieve, which is usually more money or saving money. That's really always what it boils down to at the end of the day. So in terms of kind of how I would think about kind of telling my students how to kind of provide more impact or provide more influence in these things, it's understanding what the business is trying to do and kind of understanding that business logic as a way to utilize your design thinking to influence the direction of that. You're trying to achieve a higher click-through rate on this. Okay, well, the reason users aren't clicking this is because we're not meeting these particular needs. Like you have to find your path to the business goal through addressing what the users actually need. Yeah.
But then I've heard a lot of people, and you probably experienced this in your career, and I definitely experienced this in my career, that people didn't really see the true value of UX.
Oh, yeah.
Went through a stage, and I went through a stage in my career, and I still speak to people who are still going through it, where we were just, how should you say, wireframe monkeys, or I've heard very, very different terminologies. I was using the terminology wireframe monkeys. And have you come across, and you must have come across this with your students, where they are experiencing this? How do you get them, to stick on the path, to really show value, and to really start to educate them in educating the business? How do you kind of advocate for them to move forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk a little bit about like my very blunt experience with this. I joined a business at just the lowest UX maturity. It was exactly what you said. There was a couple designers. They basically were handed wireframes, not even got to do the wireframes, and said, make it pretty.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
make the UI great. Make an email, make a banner, it's just such a kind of a factory. It was a design factory is what it was. And I was like, wow, this is not the way to do it. You're not reaping the value of design. I want to kind of caveat this with, though, that sometimes designers pigeonhole themselves into being just that, right? If you don't want to just be that pixel pusher and stuff like that, you have to find a way to sell alternative value. And some designers can't. They do not know how to add more value, or do not have the skills or possess the skills to do it. So just want to caveat that like
Yep.
not everybody is set up to kind of change the UX maturity of an org. But the way that I approached it is I literally sat down with the stakeholders. I was like, I had so many stakeholder interviews, both with the UX side and the product side, product driven org, and said, pain points. What are the pain points? What do we actually want to achieve? So on and so forth. It was probably a 6-month process, something like that. But then I came back with recommendations, and I said, this is not how we're working with design. We're giving design more time to be more explorative, to provide X impact. But what I did as a design lead in that space, and I know it's a little bit different for different folks, like different setups, but I created a UX strategy. And this is kind of going back to the business goals. I understood what the product org was trying to achieve. I set exploration pieces aside for the designers to provide that impact and say, look,
Nice.
that's our greatest asset, is our ability to create these visuals to explore future facing things before product comes to us and says, I need this, this box,
Hmm.
I need this particular thing. It's like, no. We need to be way ahead of these guys before they can even think about what the solution looks like, and then come to them with the possibilities and tell them why we think it will be impactful. So I think everybody can do that in some way, shape, or form. I think it was on a TikTok live, or it was some session that I had where somebody was like, how do I start even making influence into I'm like, oh, I'm just a pixel pusher. I'm a wireframe monkey. Like, what do I do? The first step that I always recommend is get yourself into those meetings, not to say anything, not to do anything, but just to consume the information. And that is your first step at like a seat at the table, is, common phrase we always use, but to just see what these strategy discussion or planning discussions are actually like, until you feel like you can contribute some value to it. But if you're not getting the information, you will never, never, ever, ever be able to make more influence or more impact. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest things is that when you do get to the top table, and when I've kind of got in my past to the top table, it's not what you think. It was
Mm-hmm.
completely, it was completely like, wow, there's a lot of jargon I didn't understand. There's a lot of stuff I didn't know about business that I didn't understand. And then it kind of brought me down to earth.
Mm.
Because I think sometimes UX designers, we focus too much on the user, and we kind of don't think about the business sometimes. And
Yeah.
that's just my opinion. I think people might hate me for it, but I think, we have to strike that balance, because it's not always the user. There's always a case of having a good balance of good user experience, but also business acumen and business knowledge that the business is trying to make money. And
You
that's
got to
what
talk the
designers have.
talk.
You got to talk the talk. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
totally.
Um, so I I remember when I got to that top table, and anyone who does get to that point, um, as Miranda said, just be quiet for the first 2, 3 months, soak it all in, because you will get there and you will find out that, the reasons why there are cuts, or, how should I say, no resources
Mm-hmm.
on
Focus.
the user experience, is because resources have to be allocated in other places where you
Legal
didn't know that.
compliance, or
Yes, exactly.
some of those other things. Yeah.
Because I hear a lot of UX designers complaining that, well, why don't they put resources into the experience? And, that's where the money is. And, if they have a bad experience, then no one's going to buy the product. But it's like, when you get to that top table, it is a completely different ball game.
I'm curious if you found this yourself, but I feel like when I started to get a little bit of a seat at the table, one of the epiphanies to me was these guys don't know what they're talking about. Like they don't like they are so uncertain about so many things that by the
Hmm.
time I was getting it before, by the time my designers were getting it, it felt confident. It felt so assured. But really, there was such a huge lack of oh we'll try this or we'll try that. There wasn't as much certainty behind some of the decisions.
Yeah.
But that was also an opportunity for me to be like, well, I can help you be more certain. That's lower cost than developing the whole thing forward,
Yeah.
right? Actually, just as a side note before you answer, I also being able to do that is where I was able to challenge. There was this, I remember this direction that this whole part of the organization was taking, and I thought they were wrong. And it was because of what I knew about the users. I'm like, I don't think our partners work in the way that you are building this product. And so I made a research proposal. I was like, let me go validate this. It's going to take me 2 weeks, or you could spend 8 months developing this whole thing and maybe be wrong. Like, which one do you want to do?
Um,
And,
uh,
like,
you you just opened up a memory to me, which I kind of pushed down, and I'm kind of glad you brought that one up. Um, I let me answer the question about the assertiveness.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
How did you find that? Yeah.
I found the reason why people on that top table didn't want to be assertive is because they didn't want the responsibility that they wasted resources if things fail. That's one. And two, I mean, I've been working in Switzerland for the last 10 years. So the culture is very, very different. So if you come in headstrong, you tend not to have backing and support. So they have a different culture here, whereas different in America and different in UK. Everyone's like, guns blazing, let's get our idea, let's go with it. And
Yeah.
so that's why I've only experienced that kind of top table being in Switzerland was that people here are kind of, yeah, we could try this, we could try that, but if it doesn't work, I don't want to be blamed for it, kind of thing.
I don't want the accountability.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
want the accountability.
Oh,
But
no.
the memory you just brought up, I remember this, and I remember this so vividly. And I remember it was for a company. Am I allowed to say like name? No, I don't think we're allowed to say names here. So I'll
Probably
just,
not. I don't know.
yeah, so we'll just it was with a bank, and I remember this so clearly. I remember that we were all sitting at the table and we were talking about this idea, and one product manager, I would say, was a product manager at those days. Um, he had an idea, um, and everyone kind of said, "Yeah, we can go down this route," but this other person had another idea which was better. Just that was my opinion. I thought it was better. And I remember that them two discussing, and he goes, one product manager said, "Yeah, but can you remember you spent 500,000 on this idea and only one person used it, and this idea is about 100,000, and we'll probably get it done in a faster time than you expect." I remember that so vividly. That he must have had that trump card
Yeah.
sitting in his pocket for a long time. And that's what I noticed about the top table. You got to
Well,
have a few trump cards. You have to
mm,
have a few trump cards that you can pull out. And I remember our CEO just looking at him like, wow, you
wow.
done good.
Yeah.
You done good.
Good callback.
Good callback.
Jeez.
But you put that person in place. And I remember, like, I think he left after a month after that meeting
Oh,
because,
yeah, you just
yeah,
can't go willy-nilly with it, right? It's like you can't
yeah,
just burn burn money just for kind of any idea that you want to
yes,
throw out. It should have a bit
yeah.
of backing for sure.
But I think you mentioned a good thing where UX can really help product managers or people validate ideas, and that's where I see a broken chain
Mm,
where businesses don't see that UX can get you that information that we can go and validate ideas. And what would you say to people who are in that kind of senior position or coming into that director position? Advice would you give to them to really advocate, to show to product managers, hey, we can do all this stuff for you before you even bring it to the table? Yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to say is just as we as kind of designers have a lot of empathy for our users, we also need to understand our coworkers, our internal stakeholders, right? Because genuinely, I've run into so many times that it's just a lack of experience or a lack of knowledge on what UX designers do. So, for example, a product manager who wireframes in Google Slides and comes to you with like pre-program ideas, he's very prescriptive and stuff like that. If it might not be that he's just an a-hole, it might
Yeah,
just be that he has never worked with a UX designer, or straight up, he's worked with bad designers in the past, right? That he couldn't trust, that didn't see any value past, just the visual kind of benefit that they could bring. So just always keep that in mind. Some people are absolutely just, they don't want to believe it, but some people are just straight up don't have the experience. And literally it's night and day between those type of people. Once people see the value in UX, they're like, give me more
yeah,
of it. So that's what I would say first. But the kind of advice that I would give to somebody who's kind of leading, what did you say, like leading a team, like are you
yeah,
just
but like,
director level?
yeah, coming to lead into manager to kind of like that director. And I think those are the type of people who get on the top table. I know leads do
Sometimes,
sometimes,
yeah.
but generally it is that manager, senior, director.
I mean, the best thing you can do for yourself is don't sit there and try to convince people verbally. Don't be in there and be like, hey, here's all the goodies that I can bring you. Do you believe me? Go prove it. Find a way to prove it. Side of the desk, grassroots, whatever the kind of thing is. Something that doesn't need a large budget, probably that you need approval for, something like that. But evidence will always be so much more powerful than anything you could present or anything that you could try to convince people of. So that would be my biggest advice. Or it would be like, hey guys, kind of like the example I gave before, give me 2 weeks, straight up, give me 2 weeks, and I will make you feel so much more confident in this direction or that direction. And realistically, when you really put it to them and say, okay, engineers, tell me how long this is going to take to build. And engineers will be like 3 months.
Yeah,
And then you can ask the stakeholders like, well, how confident are you that this is going to give you some ROI? And then they'll be like, it's like, well, I could make you more confident, or I could change your mind about the direction. But yeah, again, give me a shorter amount of time, give me less money, than the development, and I can provide that confidence for you. And that's the biggest thing. And that's your foot in the door. Once you do it once, they will ask you to do it again. Without
brilliant.
question.
Enjoying the content? Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on LinkedIn, TikTok, and Instagram for more updates. Your support helps us bring you even more great content. Now let's get back to our podcast.
I'm going to pivot on another topic.
Yeah.
A lot of people, let's say lead type of role to kind of senior. What I have experienced speaking to a lot of people doing the Design Ops Line podcast is that a lot of the PMs are reluctant to give full control over the experience to designers. Have you ever come across people who have said this to you or experienced this in your career where they've kind of said, I want it to look like this. I know the user, it's really, I know the product inside out. I want it like this, like this, like this. And how do you get people to start changing and trusting the UX? Hard question. I can see you just
Yeah.
you kind of blew on that one. So let's see
No,
how
it
you
is.
kind of
It
answer
is it is a really hard one. And I mean, there will always be instances where you run into stakeholders at some point in your career, and hopefully not many times, but that some people are just locked in, whether they have seniority or whatever, and they use it, etc. But I still think my previous point really stands. Keep in mind, like at least in big tech, a lot of the time, the product managers or the product folks in the orgs, their neck is the one on the chopping block. It's not UX design. It's not engineering. They're the ones who have to report the numbers. Their bonus is determined on it. Their salary is determined on it. So if you think of the empathy you need to have for that person who's you're like to have that friction with, keep that in the back of your mind because it will help you come up with a better way of working with them as well. Like, I know you're trying to achieve these goals. Like, let me help you rather than like, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah.
You know? So I would say when you have a really big friction, because yeah, I've had my designers run into this with their product folks. It's to build a better working relationships and also really iron out those roles and responsibilities. I think a lot of the time when you have somebody like that, again, they don't know the value that UX can bring. So find ways to bring it, but also find ways to bring them into your process. So rather than them going away and being like, I'm going to do this myself, I'm going to tell them the wireframe, it's only going to be like this. Find design exercises, find opportunities to collaborate together with them. Because what they want to provide is their input. They want to have a say, right? That's the thing, to have a discussion, to kind of do the back and forth rather than having this exchange of them telling you and then you hating that. And then, so I think there's a few different things and tactics you need to kind of employ when you do, when you have a stakeholder like that who's so prescriptive and kind of just almost authoritarian with kind of their approach. But bring them into the process. Find ways to prove the value of UX, I think are super key because you're educating them, but you're also not disregarding what they're saying. And if you don't work on the rapport and the relationship you have with them, your life is going to be a nightmare forever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things, design ops in general, in the company that I work in, Design Ops Align, one of the key things that we really look into is teaching people at a certain level how to use design ops and, and there's two sides of design ops, in my opinion. There's a design ops that think about scalability of really large teams, and there's the design ops who thinks about the actual operations of day-to-day work and optimizing that process. Now, I understand you kind of coach people all the way from kind of beginner level to kind of senior. Am I right? Do you also coach people into director levels and stuff like that?
Maybe not quite director level. So my current role is currently the highest role on the individual contributor track. So I've done management, but I sit right alongside, let's say, a senior design manager. So there is no higher kind of strategically, but also individually contributing person in the company,
Okay.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense. So
Yeah.
right above me is director level.
Perfect. And when you teach people, when they kind of want to move up to a certain level, do you also focus anything on the actual kind of process, on the day-to-day work?
I think it depends on where you are in your career. So lower level, the process isn't super necessary. You're
Yeah.
focused on different things, right? You're focused on just honing your visual skills, getting presentations right and stuff like that. But yeah, when you start to think, even just getting to be a senior designer, the process in which you even approach problems, like I was saying before, the toolkit, the methodologies you employ and stuff like that is super important. But it also depends on the UX maturity and the what's already established within the team. Because if you're not having design reviews, if you don't have showcases, if you don't have something like, as a senior designer, I kind of created a process around how design would, have some of these forums and some of these sessions. And then when you get to being a lead and design manager, director level, principal, I swear to God, all I do is process.
Yeah.
Like it becomes like so essential because you're looking for efficiency for your teams, for your designers. It just becomes so much of the job. It goes from your individual process to then your process with your team, your kind of direct team, to then your process for your designers. And then your scope just gets bigger from there. Yeah.
That's how I fell into design ops. It really came into the fact that as I started to get up onto the ladder on certain different positions, it became less really on what we are producing and more about what can we get out of this team.
Yeah.
So, And what can we do to educate people? What can we do to bring value? How can we keep our team above the water and no targets on their head? And it really came down to processes that were in place, or formulating processes in place to really bring that maturity up. And I think, yeah, if you're
Definitely.
coaching people, processes, it's just going to be part and part when you get to that kind of senior director level.
It's so key. Yeah, I think one of the, again, something I wouldn't have expected at the start, but kind of project management, being able to be structured and articulate a plan and put a plan together, whatever it is, whatever that plan is, so critical. Like it's surprisingly, and also it's kind of counterintuitive, right? To design, you are creative, you are maybe a little unstructured, you're kind of this or that. But in order to kind of ladder yourself up, it's, yeah, that structure and ability to kind of put plans together and execute plans. Wow, so important.
Currently at the moment, the market is moving so fast. The introduction of AI, with the introduction of many, many tools out there, which can really cut down the amount of, as you say, manual work. How are you evolving in teaching your students, and how is Survival Guide really adapting to what is just happening in the market?
Yeah, definitely. Very timely, because I just shared an article about very practical applications
Yeah.
of AI to design process. And the reason I put something like that together is because there's so much hype right now. Like we're on the tail end of the hype, I feel like, but still so much hype. And I think with all the fear out there of like, oh, is AI going to take my job? All this kind of stuff. I think that's kind of settling a little bit, but now
Yeah.
it's like, okay, it's not, I'm good, but I do need to adapt. So, and I think I think any of the designers that are out there like vehemently challenging AI is like, you're not going to be well off, bruh. Like it's not the way to approach things. And also, why did you get into tech? Like
Yeah.
tech is just straight up, period, full stop. It's an evolving industry. Like think about if you got into tech pre 2000 and then you had the big tech boom. You know what I mean? Like this isn't the first time this has happened. So, I mean, number one is you have to adapt. You don't have to keep up with the trends. That is not what I'm saying. So like the design tools and stuff like that are out there, chill on that. It's like getting the new iPhone immediately when it comes out and then it has all these bugs. It's like, well, there's no practical application. But speaking as somebody who hates tedium, I am actually really looking forward to utilizing AI, and I've already started doing it. I use it as a brainstorm buddy to think about different maybe user tasks or jobs to be done, or how to kind of formulate personas, or what's another good one? Oh, research synthesis. I just actually used it for a huge workshop, by the way,
Okay.
40 people. Imagine the sticky notes. Just envision it in your head. Imagine how many there were. Hundreds. I didn't have to go through those individually. Like, and those type of steps within the process that a machine can just do it better. Yes, of course, there was a sense check. I still, glanced over them just to make sure I felt like everything was on theme in the way that it was being summarized and stuff. But yeah, what Miro is coming out, what Figma is coming out, not only with idea generation, but also summarization. So powerful, so nice. And also, I just think it's a huge benefit for designers to be able to show off that efficiency. Like what you were saying before, budgets, timelines, things are being cut short. So companies are going to be happy when you can say, actually, I could save you a couple weeks if you get me this tool or that tool or whatever, So I think that adaptability needs to be there. I still think we're a ways off from building full designs out in AI. And also, like a side note on that as well, is I would be very fearful as a new designer relying on that because you don't know what good looks like. You don't know how to critically evaluate what is being put in front of you, whether it's serving the right things or not. So just bar none, just being like, this is good. Ooh.
Yeah.
I'd be scared.
That's dangerous. That's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
That's
Because, and then you get in front of somebody who says, but why this, why that, why that? You
Yeah.
can't back it. like we said before, that's not the way to be. You have to know what good looks like. And I truly believe the only way to know what good looks like is to do the manual labor of building up your skills to like, you know, what's the underlying of what good, construct of design is. And like you're saying before, those principles and those kinds of things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
because I think it's really the case. You should really know everything in your design. You should know and back it up. Sometimes it is based on opinion. Sometimes it's based with concrete scientific aspects. And I think, if you're not able to, as we mentioned before, to communicate the in-depth detail, and you're just using AI just to do stuff fast.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have that critical eye, right? And you have to build that critical eye before you can rely on AI.
Yeah,
Oh my
yeah.
God. I'm rapping at this point.
Yeah. It's one of those things. I think, we're going to keep talking about AI for a long time,
Yeah.
and I think,
But sorry, just another thing, but I also think it's super important. Right now, I am neck deep in evaluating how AI is going to change to the future of my product space and in my organization.
yeah,
And understanding that technology, big learning curve, by the way, what it can actually do within a product experience. But that's the true part of it's not only the efficiency and kind of like utilizing it within your design process, but knowing what AI can do for your product and how it can change the solutions that you put forward as a designer, that's going to rapidly change. And if you're late on the train, somebody else is going to bypass you, who's taking the time to understand the modularity, the large language models, how ML plays it, blah, 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 all the things. So it's crazy how critical I do believe that's going to become, because it broadens our landscape for solutions for our users as well.
but then I think that kind of ties into my question. With so many of your students coming to you, and it must come with you with, hey, I'm using this AI tool. How are you keeping up to date with what is good to use and what is actually going to be beneficial in your workflow, or what's not going to be beneficial in your kind of workflow process? How are you dealing with that?
I would say in my early career, I really tried to stay up on trends, but
Okay.
I've learned I've learned for better or for worse. No point. I think the iPhone comparison is the best. In my personal opinion, you never want to buy the iPhone like straight out the store, the first version of it, because it's not good enough. They haven't worked out the kinks. And so I'm happy to sit back, let all the trends fly, let all the crazy large repository of AI tools and everything play out. I'm not an early adopter. I don't want to work through those kinks. If I'm going to incorporate something into my workflow, it better work.
Yeah.
And somebody else, some other early adopters will have worked out all the kinks. So that's my personal perspective. I don't actually feel the pressure or need to kind of keep up with what is trending. By the time it does get big enough that, companies are buying corporate subscriptions to it, or even large groups of early adopters, stuff like that, you'll hear about it. Like, you won't have to look for it. You know what I mean? That's my personal take on it. Yeah. Otherwise, it's just straight up too much.
Yeah, it is.
You just
It's
spend all
true.
your time just keeping up on stuff, not actually doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. Because every week there's something new popping up. And
Oh,
that's why,
exhausting.
you know, people who are mentoring people, and I haven't done any mentoring for a while now, but it's such a headache to try and keep up. And it takes a lot of time and effort to say, hey, I've looked into this. This is not a good thing to go down, or this is a good thing to look into. And that's where I kind of wanted to get that question to you, is that if you're not actually doing any research into some of the tools that could help, are you detrimenting your students from benefiting from what's out there?
Hmm. Well, I would say, yeah, for example, for the, like the article that I wrote today, like large language models, pretty much
Hmm.
locked in. People are using them for a billion different reasons. But then I definitely trialed and saw if they would produce the thing that I wanted, right? Like the jobs to be done or user needs
Yeah.
or whatever, stuff like that. So yeah, I would never put anything forward I didn't full-heartedly try myself. For example, the UXL, that's the biggest one, the UXL kind of design tool. Played with it once. It was a disaster. And I'm like, cool.
Yeah.
I'll see you in 6 months, or I'll see you in 8 months. Like, I think it's just keeping in touch a little bit, or keeping that awareness, but then having periods of time where you just know things don't move rapidly enough to make any sort of kind of fundamental evolution. And then also it's just it's practicality. Like at the
Yeah.
end of the
Yeah.
day, and you got to be practical, because right now, even if I wanted to adopt a tool, I have constraints with what I can even use at my
Hmm.
company, legal, whatever
Oh,
else,
yes. Yeah.
stuff like that. So, I don't necessarily see it as a detriment, because there's cool things to play with.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do that. But when we start to really consider incorporating into our workflow, there's things that got ways to go until we get there.
I say this because I'm trying to get my colleague, I'm not going to put her name into it, but she knows who she is. I'm
Okay.
trying to get her to try out this AI user test subjects, and she is completely a no-no, a complete no-no about it.
Mm,
I'm trying to convince her just to see, like, what is the level of data that we're going to get out of these.
yeah.
I think it's called synthesizer. They're actually
Synthetic
called
users.
synthetic. Yes, it's synthetic
Yeah.
users. That's it. And she's slammed the door on me a few times. I'm actually kind of worried that she might just walk out. But I mean, I get her take on it. I really do get her take on it. It's not. I think
Which is what?
Her take is that speaking to real people, you get the real in-depth knowledge of what our user base is going to do, or you're going to find out stuff that I personally believe that AI won't tell you. And that's I kind of agree with her on that aspect, but I just wanted to see what came out. And
Yeah, but
obviously,
you don't know until you look, because synthetic
mhm.
users, again, another tool I actually did end up looking into. You can prescribe a certain set of demographics and user needs and some of these things that, again, you already know because you know your user base, but you don't know what you'll get out of that without actually seeing, right? And the example of, you guys know what good looks like because you've talked to your users and you know what could be thrown away and maybe never used again. But it's the same thing with I partnered with Attention Insights, which is a predictive AI heat mapping, essentially. Where is your website or app or whatever going to pull people's attention? I compared that with Hotjar, which is the real people coming to my site and saying, completely comparable. Like, their predictive AI mapped almost exactly to what real users were doing. But I wouldn't have known that if I just shut it down off the gate.
Yeah, yeah. I'll
You know?
get you in touch with. I'll get you in touch with her, and then you can speak to her. So
You don't know what you
you know,
don't know is really what it boils down to.
yeah, exactly. And I think I'll set up a one-on-one with her so you can try
Well,
and
and
push that one forward.
it's kind of what you were asking me before, right? I don't think we can be resistant in this space. I think we have to be open-minded and adaptive, because that's the only way, when technologies do come out that do add value, then we can go, aha, dang, this is going to save me a lot of time and money, or whatever. But if we kind of shut it all down at the gate, you never get to see one way or the other.
Yeah, true. Absolutely true. I want to ask you a question. I know it's a hot topic at the moment. I want to get your 2 cents on it. A lot of people are applying for jobs at the moment where it's very, very rough. I think the market's saturated at the moment. That's my opinion. So
I completely agree.
brilliant. And a lot of people are going through a very, how should I say, turbulent, or how should I say? Let me put it in a better way. A lot of people who are applying for jobs are just getting rejected, ghosted. The CVs are not even getting through. I've just heard stories where people even get into the final interview and don't even get a call back to say how it went. How are you teaching people to deal or to navigate through this market at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because there's no kind of magic wand or quick fix for the situation that's happened right now. And it's not that we haven't been in the situation before, but we have to, I think it's important for people to just accept it, just to be like, wow, this is not great. And realize the reason of it is because we're still off the huge influx of people getting into this industry during the pandemic. And then the wave of layoffs that kind of came after that. And we're still trying to find, or I think the industry is still trying to find its plateau through that. But how I'm kind of advising people their way through that is, I agree. I've seen this with researching this topic. People are saying it's a recommendation market. So getting recommendation, building your network and getting recommendations that way, because it's true that you will come to the top of the list if you know somebody who works in that company and bypassed, all those other kind of applicants. So building your network, and I say that so reluctantly because I'm such an introverted person, and I just wish this wasn't the case necessarily, but it's irrefutable how beneficial it is to build your network, to make connections, whether you're going to meetups or you're buying people coffee and talking with them, like how they're doing, etc. It can be so critical. And then also just maintaining that network as well, like old schoolmates and stuff like that. Me personally, so many jobs, so many opportunities through people I know. So that's a really big one. I think though, something that's come to mind recently is I think there's a really big overlook on freelance opportunities. So especially if you're new in your career, it feels like, and again, I don't have any data to back this up, but based off the questions that I get from people on my content and stuff like that, it just seems like it's just big tech. And then that's like the only option. And there's so many more. I started out my design career in freelance, and that's how I got the experience to even be thought about for big tech, right? And so I think there's alternative methods to get a job, to get experience that maybe people aren't considering as well. Because also, again, if you're brand new, it's also potentially volunteering, or it's charging very, very little, or it's, getting your foot in the door and getting that experience in your resume and portfolio is going to help set you apart. But I think it's also just, be patient, think about alternatives, and also really consider if you're ready to grind it out. Like if you're ready to put in the work. Like if you got into UX design because you think it's going to, in 6 months, you're going to be in Bali on on the beach, like with your laptop, maybe reconsider. It is a lot of work to get through it. And especially during this time, it might even be more work at the moment if you're not kind of willing to ride it out. So, yeah.
But that actually ties into my last question I wanted to ask you. If you had to go back and do it all, and you had to look at yourself when you first started, what advice would you have said to yourself coming into this industry? Now, let's forget about what's happening right now in the market. What would be the biggest advice that you had given to yourself starting out in UX?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it ties back in because as you're speaking, I'm like, the number one thing I was just talking about the other week, if it's not your skill set, it's your communication skills. Like we were just talking about before, your communication, the way you present your designs, the way you talk about your process is so essential as a designer. I didn't know this going in. I wanted to make pretty pictures. I wanted to solve, I wanted to make people happy and like stuff like that. But again, it comes in so many different forms, whether it's influencing your stakeholders or convincing somebody of a design decision, or even being able to talk to users in a way that's not leading or guiding them to a particular type of, biased answer. But it's also how you sell yourself. It is so much how you sell yourself. I think what I see a lot, and I don't know if it's in any other industry, but I think designers have a tendency to lack confidence. Like it's a thing that affects designers a lot. Lack confidence in their ability to kind of talk through things, or they're almost their own demise, right? They could be brilliant designer, but the kind of the way that they shut down, or the way that they don't really try to intrude and stuff like that on asking why, right? We're the why people.
Yes, we are the why people.
We're the why.
Definitely.
Why are you doing this? What do you challenge?
Yeah.
People don't want designers who are just going to sit back a lot of the time and kind of do whatever they say. They want somebody who's going to come at them with ideas, opinions, knowledge, and all these different things. And again, if you have it, amazing. But if you can't communicate it, you've lost its value entirely. So yeah, I would say the number one thing, and kind of what I wish I knew, or if I was starting out, would be to hone my communication skills in every way, shape, or form. Practice, record myself presenting on an interview, watch it back, as cringe as that is, try to find opportunities to maybe speak or present or do a design crit or something like that. The way that I started out was actually watching more senior designers, shadowing them and seeing what good looks like,
Yes.
and then taking notes and then being like, wow, I don't do that. I say every 3 words.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's so critical to the success of any designer, even when it boils down to just that first initial interaction, because in an interview, I think you probably know this as well. It's like, yeah, skills, experience, great, tick the boxes, yay. But do I like you?
Yes.
Can I see myself working with you?
Yeah.
And if you're shut down, if you're so like nervous and I can't see you, I can't see myself working with you. And I think a lot of designers do overlook that because they're like, I have all this experience, I have years, I have all these projects, but at the end of the day, I'm choosing probably to work side by side with you. And if that's not a conducive kind of collaboration, I'm gonna give it a second thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I've hired people, it's not about can I work with you per se. It's more, can I trust you?
Okay.
Sure. Are you gonna support me when I'm down? Are you gonna help push my ideas, or are we gonna have a good debate on why ideas are good?
Will you challenge me?
Yeah, will you challenge me, or are you going to be one of them people who's just going to say, no, your idea is better than mine, that's it, And it comes down to humility and trust. Like, I really look for that in people especially when we're hiring in general. It's really like, do you come across like everything, or do you come across like, hey, I hold my hands up, I don't know everything, but
yeah, that's a really good one as well. Yeah, because at least back in my day, like designers always had this reputation of being kind of super stuffy, know-it-alls, like, and I've never loved those designers. I've always been the one like, please rip my designs apart, rip it. I'm like, ready.
Yes.
Let's go. And so I look for some of those similar characteristics in people that are hiring. And I think exactly like you said, like, can I trust you to do that? Can I trust that you're going to raise different stuff at different moments? Which is hard to also assess in even an hour-long interview. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah, it is. It is. And I really think, you really can't find that out in an hour interview. You have to give some time to working with everyone.
Yeah.
People who are listening to this podcast right now, they're going to be in different stages of their careers. And when would you say is the best time to reach out to you and get in contact with the UX Survival Guide? And what do you provide differently that's different to the other people that's out there doing that?
Yeah. So I think the biggest kind of value add I have for anybody who looks into my content is I've been through it all. I've been through it. I've done the management. I've done the lead. I've been a senior designer. I've been a core designer. I've been an aspiring designer. Like I've kind of gone through full steps. I mean, minus director, senior director, VP, sure. But I can talk to you about any stage of your career, no matter what you're facing, no matter what challenges you have. I probably have something to say about it if I haven't had a direct, exact experience kind of going through the same thing. So that's really the value I feel like I can bring. And like I said, also is I prefer to cut through all the crap. I don't want to sell you a dream. I don't want to tell you it's going to be a breeze and tell you it's going to be easy. I'm going to tell you the truth about exactly what it's like, exactly what it's going to take. So yeah, that's my pitch on kind of like all of my content is a little bit like no BS. If you don't want to hear it, don't look at it. Or if you want to like maintain the dream or whatever, But I would say, yeah. So when the best time is, Starting out, I was very influenced by what other content creators were doing. And it was like aspiring designers, juniors, helping you break into the industry. There's so much content on that out there on that. I've started doing more, I guess you could call it mature content, but it's just content for people further along in their career when they're trying to decide between if they stay on the IC track or they go into management. What things do they need to know? Or how do you I've been getting so many great questions about how do you build an efficient team or a collaborative team, as you kind of start to lead more designers and stuff like that. And honestly, that's kind of where my passion is. I love being able to influence other people, grow other people. It's just the bee's knees. So
Yeah.
I would say the answer, the short of it is at any stage in your career, I think I have content that you would find valuable. And especially because I do try to keep on what the market is doing, what the technologies are doing and stuff like that. I try to keep a little bit of a pulse on that. So I am helping my kind of followers and stuff keep up to date with that. But not with stuff that's just going to distract them and it's like, cool. It's like, no, this is a practical consideration or something you really need to know about what's going on the market kind of thing. Yeah.
Brilliant. We'll definitely link up everything in our show notes in this podcast because it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. I would love to bring you back on the show because you have such a wealth of knowledge. I can already see from our conversations that you can bring a lot to the audience. And I think, anyone who is listening to this podcast that goes to Miranda, I can guarantee that you're going to learn so much. You can tell she has a wealth of knowledge that she wants to share out there. So we're definitely would love to bring you back on and see how it's gone.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I love hearing your perspective as well. I think the biggest thing is there is no prescriptive, like one true path, one true thing going on in this industry. So it's always interesting to kind of hear other people's experience and perspective. But it's also kind of cool that even though we've taken very different paths, like you can see the overlap, see the alignment or things that we've learned for better or for worse that, we've come out with the same results. So yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.